that Donald Trump is the greatest American threat to democracy of the 21st century? Thank you.
Look, I think that what Donald Trump did in lying about the results of the 2020 election has placed a lot of people in this country feeling like our elections are not legitimate. Now, I don't know whether it's the greatest threat to our overall democracy. I think we'll need historical perspective to make that kind of judgment. But what I will say is it's incredibly destructive to the way people feel about our electoral process right now. And you still have millions and millions of people in this country who believe that Donald Trump won the last election. All evidence to the contrary notwithstanding. And it's all because of him. And we see that it even continues in our politics to today. Lots of people in Congress won't vote for someone for Speaker if they weren't an election denier. I mean, that's just, to me, crazy and unacceptable. And it would be a lot more sane if they could show me the first bit of evidence. Again, you and I have talked about this before. I'm a prosecutor. When my assistant prosecutors, assistant U.S. attorneys would come to me and say, "Come on, boss, you know he's guilty." I say, "I don't know anything. I only know what you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And I'm not even going to hold Donald Trump to the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. How about just prove it somewhat?" And we've now had 3 years for him to prove this, and he hasn't. And so those comments and those words, clearly a threat to our electoral process, but even more importantly, beneath the office that he was honored to hold. I've said this many times. My break from Donald Trump happened on election night 2020. As I sat at the desk at ABC News as a commentator, and he came out at 2:30 in the morning and stood behind the seal of the president in the East Room of the White House and said the election had been stolen when he had absolutely no evidence to prove that that was so. And tens of millions of Americans who were probably watching and thinking, well, he's the President of the United States. He must know something we don't know because he's president. So I supported him. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I turned to George Stephanopoulos and I said, "Come to me first after he finishes." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Don't worry. I won't disappoint you." And I let him have it. And I let him have it because it's wrong. It's wrong. He couldn't have known then the election was stolen, even if it had been. We haven't even counted all the votes yet. What he knew was he was going to lose. And I'll tell you what Mark Meadows is going to testify to. He's going to testify to the fact that Trump knew he was lying when he said it. Well, if that's the case, and we renominate this guy, then we're going to get what we deserve. If the guy, and this is not like some rogue prosecutor, Mark Meadows, this is not some product of the two-tiered system of justice. This is one of the founders of the Freedom Caucus in the House, and his chief of staff, who he said was the best chief of staff since James Baker. Okay, well, if that's the case, then why shouldn't we believe him, Donald? Why shouldn't we believe him? So, New Hampshire is not going to make its decision, is not going to have the luxury of waiting for a verdict before you have to make your decision. But you know what? You're all Americans that are educated and have common sense. If his former chief of staff is going to go into a courtroom and sit as far away from him as I am from you, and he's going to take the oath, and he's going to say, he committed crimes on my watch right in front of me, what do you think the jury's going to do? I think the jury's going to convict him. And then we're going to have this situation where we have a front runner for our nomination who is a convicted felon. And if you think that the majority of the American people in this country, no matter how bad Joe Biden is, are going to elect a convicted felon who's subject to prison, and his only way to get himself out of it would be to get elected and pardon himself, which has never before been done in American history, it's not going to happen. We nominate Donald Trump. Take it to the bank today. Joe Biden is going to get reelected despite all of his faults, all of his infirmities, all of his awful policies. He's going to get reelected president because we're conducting some type of vengeance tour for a spoiled child who can't take the fact that he lost to Joe Biden. Well, I'm sorry. In this business, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And when you get into it, you got to know that's what it is. I didn't like losing here 8 years ago. Believe me, I didn't like it. And I certainly didn't like losing to him. But you know what? People get to vote and the people get to decide. And so we need people saying those things again, Quinn, so that it's not a threat to our democracy long term. But it is a threat right now. And if we renominate somebody like that, we're showing we don't value our democracy nearly as much as we should. And that's bad. It's a bad thing to show you before you ever vote. It's a bad thing to show the rest of our citizens that somehow you can do these things and get away with it. That's not what this country's supposed to be about.
Thank you.
You got it.